Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
We'll read the invocation from page 1. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya
Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vinamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Haridasaitam Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Shri Viśvāmitra. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dīnabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopikakanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vācchākalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gaudavani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we'll continue discussing Krishna's answers to Arjuna's 4 questions. And Arjuna had asked how to find out about this person who has found perfection of life, perfect peace and happiness. Something we may deem impossible, but Krishna is saying is extraordinarily possible and practical. So Arjuna was asking, what are the characteristics of someone who has found divine consciousness? And that means peace of mind. We'll define controlled mind today a little bit. And Krishna said there are 2 symptoms. And the first is very counterintuitive, but it's important. And the first is that a person who has found divine consciousness has no material attachments. What? They're not desiring wealth, fame, beauty, strength, intelligence. These material attachments do not tempt such a person. And the second characteristic is they have great happiness. And happiness, not like ours, but happiness that is steady, constant, not ups and downs, comes and goes. But they have enduring happiness through all the ups and downs and trials and tribulations. And then Arjuna wants to know, okay, if that is the symptoms, I need to know more about this person. And we said, how do they speak? And what Arjuna was trying to understand, how is the mind and words affected when someone of this consciousness faces something good or faces something bad or neutral? And Prabhupada wrote in the comment that a fool is revealed only when he speaks. So we may dress to impress, but until we speak, then our real identity is revealed. So we may pretend to be very happy and go lucky, but when we face some of these things, it is very difficult to control how the mind and the speech reacts to such a thing. So Kṛṣṇa said that one is very steady. So review that. And then we're continuing to answer the third question, which is, what is the mentality of one when their senses are controlled? So when we say, hey, the symptom is you have no material attachments, immediately one comes to, wow, are they missing them?
Yeah.
Are they unhappy? Are they miserable? Are they happy? What is their mentality when the senses are controlled, when they are not engaged in all of these material affairs? So it's another very important question, because if we're going to follow in this path, we want to know what might happen to us. And finally, Kṛṣṇa is going to answer then, okay, if this is the characteristics, this is how they are affected, mind and words, and this is the mentality when the senses are controlled, what do they do? If they're not after wealth and fame and all these other things, what do they do? What is the activity that gives them this happiness? Because clearly they're happy. So there must be something hidden. So Kṛṣṇa will explain that, and we'll be discussing that in the coming weeks. So we said there's one key theme in this section. We're going to keep repeating it over and over and over again. And what is the key theme in this section? Control the senses. The horses are like the senses. You can see the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the hand, the touch. Right? So these five senses are like horses for carrying the chariot, and sitting behind the chariot is the passenger. So the senses are very important, but they must be used intelligently. So controlling the senses does not mean stopping the senses. If we just stop the horses from running, is there any purpose for a chariot? Are we going to go anywhere? No. So when Kṛṣṇa is speaking about controlling the senses, he is saying use them productively. Don't let them run. If you let these five horses just run anywhere, what happens to the chariot? It ends up in the ditch. But if you have them nicely secured by some reins, is that enough to allow the chariot to go forward? You need somebody to drive the chariot, somebody to hold the reins and pull and direct. Then the chariot can reach its desired destination. So the horses are the senses. The reins, the ropes tying the horses are the mind. And the driver is the intelligence. So the intelligence controls the mind, and the mind controls the senses. And in this way, one reaches the desired destination. But if the senses overpower the mind, they break free from these ropes, and nothing good happens. If the senses and mind overpower the driver, then nothing good happens. When all three work in this form, where driver is controlling the ropes, which is controlling the horses, similarly the intelligence is controlling the mind, which is controlling the senses, then things happen very nicely. This is the central theme of this section, and we're going to see this repeated throughout Bhagavad Gita, and it's very important. But importantly, remember, controlling the senses does not mean stopping the senses. Does not mean, no, I'm not going to see nice things, I'm not going to hear anything, I'm not going to taste anything. No. Controlling them means using them very wisely. So we talked about how to calm the mind. And the mind is like a boat in an ocean. When the waves of the ocean are going here and there, what happens to the boat? It goes
over
here and there. Yeah. Hopefully, if it's at least, but sometimes it can even tip over. It's being tossed around by the waves of the ocean. Well, the mind is the same way when it is not situated with intelligence on the platform of the soul. Which means that when we elevate our consciousness to I am not this body, but I am spirit soul, then the mind no longer becomes disturbed by all these things that are happening to the body. And so, like if you take this boat and you just pull it out of the water a little bit, now will it be tossed left and right, up and down? No. But is the ocean still raging? This is spiritual life. We're not going to stop the coming of the cold season. We're not going to stop all these different things that are happening to us. But what we can control is whether our mind will be thrown into turbulence by such actions. If we elevate our mind, our consciousness, to this platform of I am spirit soul, then these things will not bother us. So we have to see everything that is confronting us through this lens. I am not this body. This body is temporary. It is going to break down. And eventually I'll get a new one. And even this body I'm in, every 7 years, is regenerating. So when I begin to see things from I am spirit soul, then the mind can make sense and peace with all the things that are happening. We're not going to stop the changing of the seasons, Kṛṣṇa says earlier in this chapter. But one who has consciousness tolerates them, seeing them on a higher platform. And how to do that is what we'll spend the coming months discussing. But the consciousness is that if it's raining outside or cold outside, warm or sunny, my relationship with the Lord is unaffected. If my neighbor likes me or doesn't like me, my relationship with the Lord is unaffected. If the stock market is up or down, it doesn't matter. If I get good candy on trick-or-treating or not, it doesn't matter. Because those things don't affect my relationship of the soul with the Supreme Lord. And we said the importance of matter is this. Remember the oil and the water? I didn't bring that slide today. But the oil and water doesn't mix. No matter how much you stir, it doesn't mix. Similarly, our spirit soul will not find happiness from matter. You try to mix spirit and matter, it won't work. Mankind has been trying for thousands of years. Millions and billions of people have tried through every variety of endeavor. But nobody can say they have found perfection of life until they come to the spiritual life. Because spirit must mix with spirit. The source of happiness for all of us comes from the living force. That is my soul. And my soul is made up of spirit. So it can only find real happiness in spirit. So we have to come to see. So now last week, Kṛṣṇa began to speak a very important verse about how I will achieve that first characteristic. What was the first primary characteristic of this person who is very peaceful and happy? Detachment from material things. And what is our reaction when we see that we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do that? We're very ecstatic. Yes, sign me up. No. We are like this baby. We don't like restrictions. Nobody does. Right? So Kṛṣṇa said, don't worry. I'm giving the ultimate formula, which is that you just try your spiritual life and let the higher taste of spiritual life, automatically you will lose the taste for lesser things. And I gave the example last week. If you have a $20 bill in your hand and I say, give it to me, you'll say no. But if I say, I'll trade you a $100 bill for that $20 bill, you'll trade it, of course. Who would not? Why? Because I'm trading something of lesser value for something of higher value. So how are we going to trade all of our different material attachments? The only way we'll give them up is if we can find something better. Better defined by something that will give me more happiness, more peace. That's the only way we will. Otherwise we'd be foolish. If I offered you a $5 bill, would you trade? No, nobody would. So Kṛṣṇa's not saying, hey, you have to give up all these material attachments, and oh, by the way, congratulations, your reward is suffering, unhappiness, mundane existence. Oh, he's saying, you're going to experience something so far superior that you can naturally let go. And the beautiful formula Kṛṣṇa gives, I'll discuss in a second here. So the practice is, we just start, add a little bit of spirituality to our life. And what happens? We have some tangible happiness. It's not theoretical. It's not, hey, if I do this for the next 50 years, at some point in the future, I'm going to get some, state of being that I'll like. Because if that were the case, after a few short months of trying, we say, forget it. Because we want instant results. We want instant reactions. Right? We want some experience. It has to be tangible, not just theoretical. And Kṛṣṇa reciprocates this very tangible experience of happiness. And when we hear that, it increases our attraction to spiritual life. And what happens then? We practice more devotional life. And we get more happiness and more attraction. And this cycle continues. And kind of this similar experience. That when we start spiritual life, we experience more happiness, which means automatically some of these other attractions just naturally dissipate from our consciousness. We don't even have to proactively try. It just happens as a byproduct of experiencing something better. Do you miss that $20 bill when the $100 bill is in your hand? No, you don't even think about that $20 bill. Like that, we'll do more devotional life. And slowly all the material desires are gone. And the most wonderful thing that Kṛṣṇa offers us, that we find virtually nowhere else in the world, he gives us the rent-to-own strategy. I gave the example of a house. If you want to buy a house, you get to see it once, twice, maybe thrice, hour, 2 hours max. And you have to decide, do I want this house? And am I going to spend the next 30 years paying it for it? But how great would the formula be if you say, you know what, listen, I kind of like your house, but I'm not sure. I'm going to stay in it for a month or two. If I like the cell phone reception I get in all the rooms, the neighbors are okay, the scary noises at night are tolerable, there are no crazy bugs in the house, the hot water comes just at the right time. If I like all these features, then I'll buy it. Sound like a good bargain? Yeah, we'd all sign up for that. But anybody is giving us that? But Kṛṣṇa is giving us that type of bargain. He says, don't worry, whatever your material attachments are, you don't have to give those up before you can start practicing spiritual life. He says, just add a little bit. Just try it. What's the harm? What's the loss? You just try it. If you enjoy it, you do more. If you don't, okay. You have invested nothing. Krishna is so compassionate and merciful to us. He puts no qualifications to us. Hey, if you want to render service to me, then you must meet these certain minimum thresholds. If I want to render service in a company, how many qualification thresholds I must meet? Must have a degree, some prior experiences, references, pass an interview, so many things, just for the right to work for that company. Right? If you want to be in a relationship with someone, you must give up all your other relationships. If you want one job, you must quit your other job. It's not like you can say, you know what, I think I might like that new job. Boss, I'll be back. Give me 2 weeks. If I like it, then I won't be here. Nobody gives us, but Krishna does. He's so anxious to see all of us regain our original consciousness. He says, you just try it. And by this sweetness of spiritual life, you will naturally come to your original position. Our original position is a pure spiritual life. We had no attraction to matter. We had no attraction to matter. So this is the formula Krishna is giving. So now let's read the 60th verse. Somebody wants to read the verse?
The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that are forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Purport. There are many learned sages, philosophers and transcendentalists who try to conquer the senses, but in spite of their endeavors, even the greatest of them sometimes fall victim to material sense enjoyment due to the agitated mind. Even Viśvāmitra, a great sage and perfect yogī, was misled by Menakā into sex enjoyment, although the yogī was endeavoring for sense control with the severe types of penance and yoga practice. And of course, there are so many similar instances in the history of the world. Therefore, it is very difficult to control the mind and senses without being fully Kṛṣṇa conscious. Without engaging the mind in Kṛṣṇa, one cannot cease such material engagements. A practical example is given by Śrī Yāmunācārya, a great saint and devotee, who says,
You can read just English.
since my mind has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Kṛṣṇa, and I have been enjoying an ever new transcendental humor, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it and I spit at the thought. Kṛṣṇa consciousness is such a transcendentally nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. It is as if a hungry man had satisfied with hunger by a sufficient quality of nutritious eatables. Maharaja Ambarisha also conquered a great yogi, Durvasa Muni, simply because his mind was engaged in Kṛṣṇa consciousness.
So, let us see now. Krishna is saying the senses are very strong and impetuous, O Arjuna. That they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Anybody agrees with this statement? And the senses are very strong. So what Krishna is saying is here if something is strong, we need an even stronger force to overcome it. So let's see. What is this mind control? So Kṛṣṇa is saying that it forcibly carries away the mind. And so what is mind control? What does it mean?
Trying to stop your thoughts.
Okay, one suggestion is to stop your thoughts.
Redirect them.
One is to redirect them. Any other ideas?
Consistency.
Consistency. Okay.
I'm thinking about what you want rather than what you don't. Thinking about what you want rather than.
Okay. So thinking about what you want.
What is your end objective? Maybe it could be anything, but that's the control that you have over the mind. If you're able to think what you really want to think.
So not losing the end goal in sight.
Yep.
Having a focus on my end goal, not becoming distracted. Okay. Mind control. Any other? Yeah.
Harnessing the power of the mind.
Ooh, very nice. I like that one. We're going to talk about that one. Harnessing the power of the mind. It's very powerful.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, good. Hold that thought, because we're going to come to that. What else? Any other ideas? There's no right or wrong. This is more like your own personal reflection. What does mind control mean?
Using the mind.
Huh?
Using the mind for the task rather than used by the mind.
Ooh, I like that. Using the mind versus being used by the mind. I like that. Using it for the desired goal. Just like in that chariot example, the mind is the ropes. The driver needs those ropes to accomplish the moving of the chariot. Right? But if the ropes overcome the driver and he goes flying off, well, then he's become used by the mind. So having control of the mind, we can say in some ways is, also to your point, the mind will speak so many ideas, but having good, consistent application of my intelligence to decide what to do and what not to do. To make good decisions in light of all of the mind's ideas. Does that sound okay? Reasonable? Some amalgamation of different things? A steady mind, one that isn't volatile. And what happens when we have an uncontrolled mind? Good things?
How do you know it's
Not
a good
always.
decision, though?
Yeah.
How do you know it's a good decision? Because my opinion of a good decision, I'm sure, is way different than yours.
Yeah, that is a very important question, which is, what is the good decision of the mind? So, yeah, we can talk about that now. We have lots of ideas of what's good and bad for us. What's a good decision, what's a bad decision. So, within us, superior to the mind is the intelligence. And the intelligence decides yes or no. The mind says, go to the party tonight. But the intelligence says, you have a big presentation with the boss early tomorrow morning. Better you get some good rest. And this dialogue goes back and forth. Now, the intelligence can speak that way when it has some knowledge. When it knows what is ultimately good. But if the intelligence is weak, then the mind's desire to go to the party will overrule the intelligence. So, we have to, by acquiring knowledge, find out what is good and what is bad. We have to find out what is good for me and what is bad for me. And so we can try to look for from so many areas. But ultimately, I am trying to find out what is good and what is bad for me, right? Well, who is me? The soul. We have spent inordinate amount of time trying to find out what's good for the body and what's bad for the body.
I don't think we ever got an answer, did we?
Of
'Cause
what?
It changes all the time.
Of what's good and bad for the body?
It changes all the time.
Which is why we're never satisfied with whatever we try to bring to satisfy the body. Because your desires are changing. If you get it, it's temporary. Don't do it. So we have to look through the lens of what is good for me as spirit soul. Well, who can tell us what is good for the soul?
Kṛṣṇa.
He is the supreme spirit. So he can speak to us of what is good for the soul. CNN, Google, Harvard, MIT cannot tell us what is. They may tell you some things that was good for the body, but they cannot tell you what is good for the soul. So with intelligence, we have to think, am I trying to make the body comfortable? Or am I trying to make me comfortable? And if I'm focused on me as spirit soul, then I can come to the instructions of Kṛṣṇa. And Kṛṣṇa says very simply, Man manāmava mad bhakto majaji mam namaskuru. He says, you do these 4 things. You become my devotee, you think of me. Everything will become very sweet. So the mind control is as such. But the challenge with the mind control, it's very difficult. Why? Anybody played this game? It's called whack-a-mole. What happens when you push one mole down? Then you push the other one down. Let's think like our mind.
Monkey mind.
Monkey mind. We stop one thought, great, and another 2 pop up. We stop those 2, and another 6 come. And like this, we can never catch up. We're just hammering, trying to stop the mind. But it doesn't work, because the senses are so strong and impetuous that they just go everywhere. And this idea of trying, I found this quote, a primary method for gaining a mind full of peace is to practice emptying the mind. Can you really empty the mind? Maybe for very short periods of time, you can try through some meditative techniques.
It's tough though.
It's impossible. Why?
Because we're alive.
Huh?
Because we're alive.
Because we're alive. We are active.
That's the inherent nature of a mind, actually. So.
It's the inherent nature of the soul is to be active, which means the mind will always be processing. So trying to stop the mind
Against the law.
You know how hard it is, Arjuna says? In the 6th chapter, he says, Kṛṣṇa is giving some process to try to control the mind through Ashtanga Yoga. And Arjuna says, hopeless. I have a better shot at capturing the wind within my hand than I do trying to capture my mind. That's how difficult it is. We can say it's impossible. So to try to artificially stop the mind isn't going to work. Because there's a fundamental flaw. What's in the mind? All kinds of desires. Right? Desires. The mind is a storage house of desires. Our scriptures define the mind as such. It stores desires. I have a desire to eat pizza. I have a desire to go to Hawaii. I have a desire to wear a red shirt. I have a desire for this and that. So many. How many desires do we have? Endless. We cannot get to the bottom of it. And what do we want out of all of those desires? Happiness. The problem with trying to get rid of all those desires is that the taste for those things remain. Okay, I don't want Hawaii anymore. No. But the taste for Hawaii still is there. I don't need the red shirt anymore. But the taste for it is there. So I can try to artificially remove it. But it doesn't work because the taste for those objects are still there. So now how are we going to control the mind? So the inactive path is just trying to empty the mind. Empty it out. But there's no way to do that. It doesn't work. And this is the Jnana Yoga path. It's detached from all things material. So the Jnana Yoga path says, you know what, I am spirit, so I'm going to detach from everything material. That's good, but it's incomplete. Because what's missing? I'm going to detach from material, but what's missing?
Attachment to the higher super.
Attachment to something else.
Do those people use a yoga mat?
Well, they sit on kusha grass and deer skin. Yeah, they perform. See that? Let me come back to that modern yoga today, because there's a very practical means for that. But this Jnana Yoga is detaching from matter. But you're not going to detach from that $20 bill unless I give you something else first. I need to attach you to something first. Then you'll detach from that. So the Jnana Yoga path says detach from the $20 bill. It's detaching from matter.
And do what?
Exactly. And do what? Meditate. Speculate. Because it doesn't yet speak about the nature of soul. So we understand half the equation. I am not matter. I am spirit. But now I need to know the other part of the equation, which is, what then is the activity of my soul? If I'm not to engage in matter, okay, I understand I can't mix the bottle of oil and water. That's great. But I need to know, what is it that I should do? What is it that will give me sthita prajna, divine consciousness? This is the active process of controlling the mind. Not just relinquishing matter, but knowing how to act in a way, and that is bhakti yoga. So Kṛṣṇa says, forget about going step by step. Just practice spiritual life. Because what happens as we do more spiritual life?
We want more.
And what is the experience of our spiritual life? Happiness. 1. And 2? Peace. 3? What? Detachment. So what comes in Jnana Yoga is included in bhakti. You see? It's not separate. It's already included. Because the yoga is steps on a ladder. When you've reached the top step of the ladder, means you've already accomplished what is given by the lower steps.
What is the example of Jnana Yoga?
Huh?
What are the examples of Jnana Yoga?
So the Jnana Yogas, they will basically detach from all matter. And they will not interact with anything of matter. And it's a process where they study Vedanta and trying to speculate on the ultimate source of what's going on. So it's a very, then there's many definitions of Jnana Yoga and variation. But in general, it's a position of detaching from matter.
It sounds like a waste of time.
I would argue, I would concur. Because it won't, unless Jnana Yoga then turns into attaching to something, you're going to go back to your material attachments. You see? If you've given up the $20 bill in hopes of getting something else, you might even temporarily give it up. But if you don't get something else, eventually you'll go back to that. So it is and Kṛṣṇa is going to say it's a waste of time, because he's going to say, yogi namapi sarvesham madgate nantaratmana. He says, you shraddhavan bhajate yomam. With faith, you become my devotee. That is the highest, most intimately united with Kṛṣṇa platform. So, to control the mind, we have 2 options. One is the inactive path, and the second is the active path. By practicing spiritual life, we automatically control the mind. Not stopping the mind. Not emptying the mind. But filling the mind with spiritual ideas, spiritual desires. Remember, the mind holds desires, right? So it can either hold material desires or spiritual desires. The practice of bhakti fills the mind with spiritual desires. Oh, I would like to honor prasabhaṁ. Oh, I would like to see the form of the Lord. I would like to hear about his pastimes. I would like all the senses, hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, all create more desires in the mind. So this is the active process. By adding spirituality, we automatically do all the detachment that's required. It's the 2-in-1 process. And what is more enjoyable? Trying to give up everything and eat roots and berries in the forest, or engage in Kṛṣṇa consciousness and honor wonderful prasadam, associate with devotees, sing and dance with the Lord, celebrate festivals. Which has more happiness? It's obvious. So the mind is either the worst of enemies, when it is filled with jumping monkeys, or it is the best of friends. It depends on how it's used. Just like a knife. A knife is neither good nor bad. A knife in the hands of a criminal is a very dangerous item. But the knife in the hands of a skilled surgeon can save a life. So it's how it's used. So Kṛṣṇa in the 6th chapter will give these beautiful verses in the early part of the 6th chapter, where he explains that one who has controlled the mind becomes the best of friends. How many of us would like our mind to be our best friend? Think back to those ropes. If those ropes are nicely controlling the horses, and they are strongly in the hands of the driver, the intelligence, those ropes are very, very valuable. So the mind is a very powerful resource. Why? Because the mind can take us into so many directions. So spiritual life is about turning these monkeys into beautiful spiritual thoughts. And how that'll happen? Well, how did I develop the desire to go to Hawaii?
Learned about it.
Huh?
Learned about it.
I learned about it. So how am I going to develop spiritual desires?
Hang out here.
That's right. Experience spiritual life. And slowly we'll fill the mind. Because just trying to artificially control the mind, Kṛṣṇa says, the senses are so strong and impetuous that even if you try to control the senses, it's very difficult. These horses are powerful. So you need an even more powerful thing. And what is it? It is the higher taste of spiritual life. The verse we discussed last week. That with that, one can control the mind. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of Viśvāmitra Muni. And this is going to give in a story showing the power of Bhakti Yoga over Jnana Yoga. Viśvāmitra Muni was performing great austerity and penance. He was a great, powerful yogi. And actually, he was acquiring some great power, and the positions of some personalities were threatened. So they sent, and for some other reasons also, the very beautiful Menakā to come and disturb his meditation, so that the boon of that meditation would not be generated and one's power would not be usurped. It is explained that this very powerful yogi, and this is not meant to minimize Viśvāmitra Muni's position, it is to show the power of the senses. Make sure we don't take the wrong conclusion with this one. This is to demonstrate that controlling the senses is so hard that even somebody so great can be a trap. So, as Menakā is walking, not even seeing, but just hearing the ankle bells from her, his trance was broken. He opened his eyes, and ultimately they got married and had a very wonderful family and went off and did very nice things. But not even the sight, the sound of the ankle bells was enough. Not even the words spoken. So strong are the senses that even the great sage Viśvāmitra Muni was pulled off from his goal. His goal was to practice and complete his meditation, but it was disturbed. Then we see the pastime of Srila Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was a great saint and a great devotee. He was in what is modern day area of Bangladesh, in the area of Benapole. And there, Haridas Thakur was getting great fame and attention because of his purity of bhakti. He was chanting the names of the Lord 300,000 times a day. That's about 192 rounds. Don't worry, we only have to do 16. And he would not eat, he would not rest, do anything until this japa was done. And he was so in bliss in chanting the holy names of the Lord. He was full of happiness. And great fame was coming to him, unwanted by him, to see how powerful this personality was. So the king of that area became very envious. So what happens when we become envious of somebody? What do we
bring them down.
We try to bring them down, defame them. So he said, I'll show his character. So he brought one very, very successful prostitute who had never been rejected. Very beautiful person. And he said, I want you to go to Haridas Thakur's bhajan kutir, deep in the forest, and you engage with me. She said, no problem. So she comes first evening. In the evening time, when the mode of passion is very strong, and she began to speak that I've come to see you. And he said, no problem. I am chanting my japa. As soon as I finish my japa, whatever desire you have, I will fulfill. Just wait for me to finish my japa. So he continued finished his thing in japa. He didn't tell her how long he had left. So he kept chanting and chanting. Well, almost early morning hours he finished. But she had gone. Well, the king asked, were you successful? No. But tonight I'll be successful. Second night she came back. Same story. He said, you wait, whatever your desires I will fulfill, but let me finish my japa. He's chanting his japa and she's waiting and waiting. Finally she gets tired, goes back. Third night she comes back. Same thing. When I'm done, whatever your desire. And after finishing his japa, he opened his eyes and he's finished chanting, and she is there. And he asked, what is your desire? What is your plan? You have come 3 nights in a row. You must have some business here. And then she said, my original intent was to come to engage with you. But hearing the holy names from your mouth, the sweet transcendental sounds, all of my desires have gone. And I have now one desire remaining. And that is, I want to surrender unto you. And you please engage me in bhakti. Whatever you were doing, I want the sweetness of. And he instructed her that you go to the banks of the river, you build a small bhajan kutir, and you do your japa. And from that day forward, she became very advanced devotee. Now you see the difference. In the case of Viśvāmitra Muni, his transcendental meditation was broken. But in the case of Haridas Thakur, she was broken and uplifted. This is the power of bhakti. When you have the taste of the holy names, nothing can attract you and disturb your consciousness. And thus the mind becomes very, very controlled. Not by some artificial means, not by some difficult, arduous process of tying up the mind into a ball and holding it steady. No. By experiencing this sweetness and bliss, Haridas Thakur took no effort. There was no taste, as Yāmunācārya also experienced. That taste which was so attractive previously, now becomes almost bitter to think about. Why? Because something so much sweeter has come. Something so much sweeter has come. So yes, the senses are very strong. And yes, the mind is very powerful. But when the senses and mind are engaged in the business of the soul, then everything works so beautifully. So the idea is not to empty the mind. The idea is not to stop the senses. The idea is to engage the mind and senses in the activity of the soul. And the activity of the soul is bhakti. It's just spiritualism. Not getting rid of desires. It's impossible. It won't work. It's a waste of time. Because the taste for those things will not dissipate. But with the power of devotional life, they can go very easily. And very quickly also. So as I've been saying from day one, from last January, Kṛṣṇa consciousness is an additive process, not a subtractive process. Just add spirituality to your life, propelled by the higher taste. These lesser tastes will slowly dissipate. Don't worry. And it'll give you such strength that you will be able to harness the power of the mind to accomplish extraordinary things, including bringing perfection to your own life. So let us not try to subdue the power of the mind. Let us try to redirect the power of the mind. Artificially doing it won't work. Any comments or questions?
I think there was a story with Śrī Prabhupada and a devotee. She was a smoker, and I don't know if it was at Detroit or not, but she was doing service, and sometimes she used to take breaks. Śrī Prabhupada asked her, while we're doing service, we don't take breaks. And then later on, she doesn't know when she gave up the habit, and
Many devotees are like,
yeah, and I think they started to sing Kṛṣṇa.
many people. We all have attachments. We all have them. But remember, the path to spiritual perfection is finding spiritual desires and losing our material desires. But nobody likes restrictions. So Prabhupada said, don't worry. What was happening is they were in the kitchen cooking for Kṛṣṇa, and she began to smoke a cigarette. Prabhupada is very tolerant, very patient. He said, no problem, but go outside and smoke. And when you come back, wash your hands. Why he could be so tolerant? Because he knew this taste, after she experienced the taste of cooking for Kṛṣṇa and serving Kṛṣṇa, it will go away. He didn't become upset. He did not become chastised, or how you could have this type of desire. You are serving Kṛṣṇa in this kitchen. How? No. He had faith in Kṛṣṇa and the power of bhakti. He just said, don't worry, you go outside and just wash your hands. Very patient, very tolerant. That should be our mood. So many examples like that. Any other questions, comments?
Here in the verse, this is senses are strong and impetuous, right? But generally, without soul in the body, senses are just dead. So actually, it's all about mind thinking, or because sense doesn't do anything, right? It's our mind gives a command and they act on it, right? Either hands or eyes or ears or whatever.
So, remember there are two types of bodies. We have a gross body and a subtle body.
How?
Yeah. Gross material body, meaning the things I can touch and feel, right? I can see my eyes, ears, body, legs. That's made out of earth, air, fire, water, ether. Right? So that is the material body, called the gross body. Then we have the subtle body. Gross not in disgusting, but gross is in scientific gross. So then we have the subtle body. The subtle body is also matter, but it's subtle, meaning we can't see it, but we can perceive it. And that is the mind, intelligence, and false ego. It's all matter. And the life force for all these 8 constituents of the body is the soul. So when the soul is present, there is life in the body. As soon as the soul leaves, what happens?
Those things leave.
The body starts to contribute. So the senses are part of the gross material body. Then you have the mind. The mind is this reservoir of desires. But superior to the mind is the intelligence, which is the decisioning, yes or no. Beyond the intelligence is the false ego. A little bit of a subtle topic. We'll discuss that later. And then you have the soul. So there's a hierarchy in this process. So even the mind itself is material. But by bringing spiritual thoughts, we can actually bring our mind to a spiritual plan. In the spiritual world, there's also a mind, but it is pure. There are senses. Kṛṣṇa is called Rishikesha. Why we should engage our senses in Kṛṣṇa's service? Because he is the master of our senses. Who gave us the senses? Who gave us the ability to see? Nature? Kṛṣṇa did. Kṛṣṇa gave us the ability to see, and we should see in unison with him. Same thing with hearing, taste, touch. Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
Prabhu, when the soul takes birth, in this world, it comes with some karma. That is what I believe you're explaining, the body, which is falsely on the mind. It comes with that. So what we are trying to do is, with Kṛṣṇa consciousness, you are trying to clean the mind and false ego, so that the subtle body becomes pure, and the soul also becomes pure, so that there is no need to be again back in this material world, so we go back.
Close, but not quite. So let me kind of just make a couple of adjustments to what you said. So the soul is always pure, because it is part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa. So how anything coming from Kṛṣṇa can become impure? So the soul is always pure. And the example we always give is a diamond. If you take a diamond and you stick it in the mud, the diamond doesn't become contaminated. It's just covered. So I can't see the purity of the diamond. It's covered. Similarly, the soul is pure sitting within our heart, but it's covered, so we don't see it. We don't experience it. We can't have consciousness of it. It's covered by impurities. What's the impurity? False ego. What is false ego? I am this body. The idea that I am this body is our false ego. Ego means I am. False means a false sense of who I am. So when I think I am this body, that is the false ego. So that covers the original consciousness of the soul. So when the soul comes from the material world, it doesn't have karma, it has a degree of covering. How thick is that cover? Just like that mud. If it's a very thin layer, I can actually see the shape of the diamond, I can see some aspects of it. But if it's caked on very thick, then I have no perception of it. So we have different degrees of covering. And Kṛṣṇa will use this also to explain different degrees of envy. So, our soul now is covered by this false ego. So the practice of bhakti is to cleanse the mirror of the heart, to remove this dirt, this dust, which is obscuring the purity of the soul. The soul does not become impure, it is just covered.
Okay, but we have to do bhakti to get rid of your karma. So, so what are these coverings over this diamond? If it's not karma.
So karma is the reactions that are waiting for us based on our past activities.
But he's saying when the soul comes, do you get the react like?
There's no karma yet. Why?
Past karma.
No, when it first descends from the spiritual world, there's no
No,
karma.
he's talking about the rebirth, I think.
Yeah, because there's no activity. The first actions start to generate karma. Every action I do generates karma. So now I have mountains and mountains of reactions waiting for me. Because I have been performing different actions for millions of years. So now how to get rid of them? By the practice of bhakti. But bhakti doesn't only get rid of our karma. That is one aspect of it. And he says, Aham tam sarva papebhyo. Kṛṣṇa says, I will deliver you from all your sinful reactions. The reason it doesn't only is the problem is this. If we just remove the sins, what is the problem? What happens next? So okay, I'm free from all sins. Now what happens?
I don't know, you probably start creating more sins.
Thank you. You do know. You start creating more sins. Why? Because that's where your taste is. That's where your taste is. So what bhakti does, yes, it clears all the old sins. That's good, but what's more important is it purifies the heart so that the tastes of these stale activities are no longer there. So the taste for sinful life dissipates. When the taste is gone, it means there'll be no more future sinful reactions. That's the even more powerful result of practicing bhakti. So yes, by practicing bhakti, we will eliminate all of our past sinful reactions in time. But even more powerful than that is it will purify the heart to bring about these real sweet desires. So bhakti is not single-faceted, it's multifaceted. The results are multifaceted.
When you talked about these layers on the diamond, what is an example of that?
So that is the false ego. How strong is my sense that I am this body?
When you leave the body, what happens to the false ego?
Oh, good question. So when you leave the body, that the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and false ego,
It's still there.
they carry the soul to the next gross body. So the mind we have is the mind we've had for millions of lifetimes. The intelligence we have is the same intelligence we've had for millions of lifetimes. But sarva sikshaham shradivishto matashmatir jnanam apohanam cha. Kṛṣṇa says, we forget. He is a source of forgetfulness. We forget our past lives. But it's the same intelligence, mind, and false ego. So that subtle body is carried forward with us wherever we go. Ultimately, until we find our way to go back to the spiritual world, when we go back to, as soon as we hit the Viraja river, the whole subtle body is left behind, and one resumes their original spiritual form. All this is explained in this Shastra.
So nothing happens to the false ego. It's still that.
No, it dissipates. It purifies. It disappears. Because again, false ego is, as soon as we have no more consciousness, I am this body.
But when you take the body, then only we'll have a consciousness that I am a body. If you leave the body, unless and until you take another body, either it can be in any
you'll
form.
take another body.
Yeah.
But
You'll have that consciousness of that particular body or whatever.
You'll still have that until you permanently have this, I am not this body. This stupidity we have, if I can speak so strongly, is we have left so many bodies behind, and I know absolutely that I'm not that body I left behind, but now I think I'm this body. And then I know this body is going to be left behind, but then I'll think I'm the next body. And I keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. That is the ultimate definition of an insanity. So, but as soon as the false ego is gone, the false ego is a subtle discussion, so I don't want to go too deep. But it's this idea that I am the body. So how much, there's degrees of impurity, right? Just like any window. Some windows are very dirty, some are very clean. There's different levels of impurity. There are different levels of impurity in our heart. And the heart becomes pure by the practice of bhakti. Yes, along the way, past sinful reactions will also be dissipated. But those are two different things. Two different things.
Not to stretch, but
Huh?
not to stretch, but you're using the heart as a word again. So heart is again physical organ in this case, or it's still some part of the soul, or what do we call it?
Because the soul resides in the heart, the impurities also are residing in the heart because they are coming. The 6 impurities of the heart, the anarthas, they reside as impurities within the covering of the soul.
When we really advance in bhakti, is the goal to see Paramatma in our heart?
The goal?
If the result of really advancing in bhakti, do we see Paramatma in our heart?
That's not the ultimate goal, that's the second level of realization. The ultimate is to see Kṛṣṇa in our heart.
Right.
To see Kṛṣṇa when I chant Kṛṣṇa dancing on my tongue. To see Kṛṣṇa everywhere. That is the ultimate.
In this form only? Is this the form?
That is the original form. There are many forms of
And
Kṛṣṇa.
when you use Paramatma, what does it mean? I don't know.
Paramatma is there are many different forms of Kṛṣṇa. He expands himself. Specifically, Paramatma is residing in our heart as an expansion of Shirodakshay Vishnu, the forearm form. So in our heart is residing a forearm form of Kṛṣṇa. But his original form is the two-armed form. And that Kṛṣṇa will explain in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Now we're getting into a very subtle topic.
Coming back to the harnessing the power of the mind, how I heard some devotees say that they can, the mind is like a radio too, you can tune into Kṛṣṇa consciousness or being attached to material things obviously, but so how do you tune into that channel of Kṛṣṇa consciousness and always know, because that happens to me brief, very subtly, sometimes once in a blue moon.
It's not subtle, just chant. When you chant, you are channeling Krishna's holy names on your tongue. When you chant, you hear. The process of chanting is we speak and hear. We engage both senses in chanting. And you create a very strong, vibrant connection. Don't try to create some esoteric connection. It's very difficult. We don't connect with esoteric things. We want tangible. So what's tangible? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. That's tangible. And you can feel the tangible effect in your heart the more you chant. So Krishna is saying,
but we are all doing it for intangible thing, right? For a spirit. But through tangible means we are doing it.
no, the intangible just means that I can't touch it, but it's tangible in the sense that the result is the real. It's experienced. Right? Kṛṣṇa says pratyakṣa vagamam in the ninth chapter, second verse. Rajavidya rajaguyam pavitram idamuttamam pratyakṣa vagamam. He says that the experience of bhakti is directly perceived. It's not an intangible experience, it's a tangible experience. You can perceive that when I go to the temple, or I come in this association, or I hear that there's something there. There is a tangible effect, a feeling of peace and happiness. So it's not, because actually if there were not, it'd be very difficult on the power of just logic and philosophy to practice.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't experience, so that is Krishna's mercy. He is reciprocating that experience. He is the source of that taste. He is the source of the bhakti rasa. And He is giving that to us based on how sincerely we practice bhakti. The more sincerely we practice, the more pure and strong that taste will come.
Not for this session, but sometimes would we have to listen to more of what happens when you say we are happy. So who is experiencing? Through our body we are experiencing, our soul, we'll
What
have to
is
hear
the-
more.
The basis of our happiness.
Yeah.
We can discuss that.
And what is experience, what is happiness? These are all intangible words.
Something, the destination of three paths like karma, yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga. Is the destination same or it's different?
So when you go on a ladder, you climb a ladder, is the destination in three different places or the same?
Different level.
Right? There are progressive steps. So same thing. Karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, buddhi yoga, bhakti yoga. So there are sequential steps. Not I'll go left, I'll go right, I'll go there or behind. So it's not, oh, you're a karma yogi, I'm a jnana yoga, you're a bhakti yoga. No. They are sequential. Just like second grade is a sequential step to third grade, to fourth grade, and so on. They're not different paths. And that's a very important question. Kṛṣṇa says that because some may interpret and understand that to be each of them as the end-all be-all. But no, they are progressive steps ultimately to bhakti. And that is Kṛṣṇa's opinion, who has created the yoga system. He created all these rungs of yoga. And then he says, and when you do bhakti, you get all of the benefits and results of all of the prior levels of bhakti. I'm sorry, prior levels of yoga. Just like if you climb to the fifth step, you've already got the result of climbing the fourth step, and the third, and the second, and the first. So bhakti includes it all. It is not separate. Okay? It's often misunderstood. But again, every question or doubt we have, Kṛṣṇa will answer. And He answers it very explicitly and clearly. Because He is knowing to anticipate all of our different questions. Yeah.
I have a question slightly. Well, association is very important. So I know, Śrī Prabhupada mentioned there's like different ways to relate with other devotees. Can you just briefly list them? I don't know.
Rupa Goswami talks about association in the fourth chapter of Nectar of Instruction, the Śrī Upadeshamrita. And there he says there's some general guidelines of how to associate with devotees. But association means one thing. It is not to be in the physical presence of. It is to become inspired by. Association means to draw inspiration from. So, when we are in the association with devotees, we should see, the good qualities in everyone and see how we can bring those into our own consciousness. And Prabhupada established ISKCON for one reason only. To give a means for association for those who are desiring to find this perfection of life. He likened it to the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce is an association that is meant to help businesses prosper. The temple, the Bhakti Vriksha, it is an association to help souls who are looking to find their way back home, shedding the false ego and all the impurities, to help together prosper. And that is why this is very important. And if you want a very tangible experience of the spiritual world, you come to the temple this Sunday. We're going to have the Pushpa Abhishek, this flower festival. It is an extraordinary experience for the senses, mind-boggling. You'll be taken to a place. Even I'm building all this up, you'll say, yeah. Still, it'll happen. It is an extraordinary experience where we get to see all the wonderful flowers being offered to the Lord, hear amazing kirtans, we're smelling these flowers, we're showering each other with these. It's an incredible experience. It'll give you a glimpse, just a tiny glimpse, into the spiritual world. When Srila Prabhupada established these temples as hospitals, a hospital is meant to give the body health. Right? A hospital is meant to give the body health. A temple is a spiritual hospital to give the soul its original health back. And that's why it's so important. And now we have to contact sense.
Is that another name for Kṛṣṇa? Is that in the book somewhere?
That was great.
Shall we chant?